All right, guys. So today we're going to be talking about Tipalti and Attivo, bringing the most advanced global payables automation solution to SAP Business One or to your ERP system. Today we're going to be talking about our partnership with Attivo and Tipalti, the state of AP, Tipalti, and the SAP Business One demonstration. And we're going to end with a Q&A. Len is going to give us a little bit of background about Attivo.
Okay, thank you. And I assume everybody can hear me because we've been chatting already. And just a few words about Attivo to introduce who we are. We are at the core of our business, we are an ERP value-added reseller. But from the very beginning, our passion has been about process improvements. And those are the kind of improvements that enable growth and profitability of our target markets, which are small and mid-sized manufacturing, distribution, and service companies. And what I've seen is that there's a lot of extra work going on in the area of all areas of electronic banking, especially accounts payable. So we've been around for close to 30 years now. We've grown to 3 offices across the country. One of our specialties is SAP Business One, and that is what this particular webinar is going to be talking about, Tipalti and its benefits and how it's been integrated tightly with SAP Business One. But it is also integrated with other ERPs, and we are in the process of implementing an integration with Macola right now as well. So other than integrations, we provide implementation and support services for ERP systems. We are a cloud hosting provider, which has really grown in popularity in the last few years and continues to grow. We do a tremendous amount of custom application development to fill in the blanks, that extra last mile of ERP implementation. And as we have done with our partner Tipalti, we integrate systems that handle specific problems like accounts payable automation with those ERP systems. You can switch to the next slide. So you might say, well, gee, Len, I've heard that there are multiple companies out there that do the kind of thing that Tipalti does. Why did you partner with Tipalti? Well, the answer is that we vetted quite a few organizations, and we have found that Tipalti, who's been in business over 10 years now, which is relatively young for or relatively old, I should say, for a company in this space. What I found was their technology, as it relates to the integration, was way ahead of everyone else. What I'm referring to is what is called an application program interface, or API. You may have heard of that expressed that way, which allows the integration of 2 systems to talk to one another. And the technical support, the technical team, the sales team, the marketing team, everyone at Tipalti has been extremely helpful and easy to work with. And that gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling, because not everything goes smoothly in business. And I know that they're going to be there when we have problems to resolve for our mutual clients. But this part about accounts payable is very important to me, because before I started out in ERP implementation, I actually was an accounting manager myself, and I supervised accounts payable. And I recognized that accounts payable is one of those areas that just takes a lot of labor to do things that are mostly black and white. So it's a real opportunity for automation, because the rules are clear. Either the invoice matches with the purchase order and the receiver, or within some tolerance, or it doesn't. If it doesn't, there's an exception. Somebody has to look at it. And so it's ideal to be able to free up organizations from all of that manual effort of entering accounts payable and give that time back to them for doing revenue generating kinds of activities instead of menial activities that we have learned to automate in this age. So I'm really happy about our partnership with Tipalti. It's really at the forefront of a lot of great technology, and I look forward to working with our mutual clients. Ron, I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah, thank you, Len. Always good to hear from you. Always good to talk with your customers. As Len said, my name's Ron Griswold. I have been in the, we'll call it accounts payable technology space for about 12 years with a few different providers. Currently, I manage a team that owns the relationship with several ERPs, including SAP. So you'll kind of learn a little bit about why with my experience, I moved over to Tipalti, earlier this year. And as kind of a side note, Len is a great person to learn from because, he obviously brings the solution out to his customers, but he also had it implemented in Attivo. So they're users of the solution as well. So I think that's a great banner to say that he believes in it and Attivo believes in it because they actually use it themselves internally for their own business. So I'm going to start out just providing a little background on some of the changes that are facing finance teams today. So the role of finance has really been broadened mostly over the last decade. And this isn't really new to anyone. Beyond the core accounting responsibility, bookkeeping, financial reporting, analysis, closing the books, finance leaders are really playing a prominent role in a company-wide strategy. And that can include M&A, it can include globalization, it can include a multitude of other things. So CFOs have also had to become a lot more strategic and a lot more, I guess, prominent as a voice of the company. If you're a large company, if it's investor relations, if it's a smaller company, just to make sure that there's a consistent strategy from top to bottom, throughout the company. So that involves communications with the board as well, which certainly every finance executive is dealing with today. So suffice to say, the role of finance has broadened and it's become a lot more strategic. So the problem is that the back-end processes that support that are still very manual, which takes a lot of effort, a lot of time to get done. So they don't always catch up to some of the changing environments that are out there. So in fact, the effort may be higher now that you've had to deal with some of the areas like the gig economy, as they call it, different business models, maybe multinational vendors, multinational customers. A lot of vendors and partners are dispersed globally, which just makes things a lot more challenging. There's obvious things like, currency, different currencies that need to be converted, but there's also different business policies. There's different tax, the way that companies do tax is always different in different industries. So if you want to broaden your business, it's not always as easy as saying, I want to go sell into another country. There's a lot of factors that have to be considered. And these are some of the things that companies find out sooner or later that Tipalti is kind of like waiting for them when those initiatives come, because we've already taken care of the regulatory compliance and things of that nature. So when you're ready to make that move, you have a partner that's going to help you get through it, almost like a consultant. I don't consider Tipalti to be just like a solution provider, but it's very consultative in trying to help our customers through some of these nuances to grow the business. So the accounts payable process today, these are some certainly important statistics, but they're almost like what you might call like talking points. So manual onboarding of vendors. Throughout my career, I have seen a lot of companies that have kind of hung on to the culture of onboarding vendors manually until something really unfortunate happens. What I mean by that is you start to bring on new vendors, or your vendors change their bank account information or their payment methods. And what's the process to, number one, collect that information? Let's say they change their bank account. What's the process to collect the new bank account? How is it going to get authenticated? How do we know it's everything is correct and aligned to that same vendor? How do we know it matches to that legal name of that company, the address of that company? And that's just the very first point here. It's something that I've spent a lot of time with customers on because they feel like it's something that's simple, just collecting bank information or vendor information, but the liability is extremely high. And as we'll talk about in a couple minutes, that's where a lot of unfortunate situations like fraud and email compromise that can tap into companies' bank accounts occur. So our take at Tipalti is the most time-consuming activity is the ones that should be automated. If it's something that's repetitive and it takes a lot of time, if you feel like it's something that's taking longer than it should, that is a prime candidate for something that should get automated potentially. So what we've done is take the whole chain of events that happens from the time the PO is about to be created all the way through to when it's reconciled and the taxes are done, and said, where can we automate and what makes more sense to have, hands on it. And we feel like it's always a work in progress, but we're at a point now where we've got a very, very good process to know what those things are. So as far as finance in the modern business, these could be looked at as certain pain points that the customers have, that we solve. So 80% of the efficiency, of the workload that gets eliminated, a lot of that is things, again, that are very repetitive. Printing checks, licking envelopes, mailing checks, tracking them down if they don't get to where they need to go, creating POs on paper, taking them down to the person that needs to approve them. When the invoice comes in, going through the mail and getting those invoices, taking those to the people that need to approve them. It's a very time-consuming process that really doesn't need to be. It's a process that could be locked down by an electronic process, which is what Tipalti does. One of the ways, what people ask pretty frequently is, how does Tipalti differ from some of the other providers out there? And what I'll say is that there's platforms out there that will create and distribute POs. There's platforms that will ingest and capture invoices. They'll have OCR, which will, code them into your ERP. They'll route them to the right person to get approved. And then there's platforms out there that will facilitate payments out, or it can be done, oftentimes through your bank. There's platforms that can do reconciliation and tax compliance. What Tipalti does is takes all 4, maybe even 5 of those systems and puts them onto one platform where the chain is all connected. So you have one source of truth. Some might call that one throat to choke, but you have one place to go for all these processes. So you're not, let's say, duct taping together multiple processes to get this done. It's much, when you're going to get an automated system, it makes a lot more sense to have them all connected and flowing together. So that's really what we try to do. And we extend it out to, cross-border we're very, very strong in FX with, well over 100 countries that we pay into, well over 100 currencies that we convert to, touchless invoicing. Not all these apply to every company, but what we do is make sure the companies understand the full breadth that Tipalti does, and then learn your process that you do today and make recommendations and kind of collaborate with you to be able to figure out what makes the most sense, what parts of Tipalti are really going to help your business based on where you're at today, and more importantly, where you're going to go in the future. So as you start to grow your business, which is the goal of most companies, you're not having to dilute your new earnings by hiring more people to, do data entry for invoices or, print checks or gather bank account information, but you get to keep the new earnings and reinvest it into the company, which is the whole point of growth in the first place. You're not having to redisperse that growth just for, for more menial tasks. So one thing that I always like to also talk about is payments fraud. I've been very close with the Association of Finance Professionals, the AFP, for many years. They come out with a study. It's very detailed, very inclusive every year. I like to disseminate it down a little bit to customers just to highlight some of the important parts. So the good news in this study is that 8% of companies that were polled found that fraud was occurring less in 2021 than it was in 2020. That's great news for that 8%. and nearly 2/3 said it was about the same. So the problem is that almost 30%, almost 3 in 10 companies reported that fraud was higher in 2021 than it was in 2020, which is problematic because 2020, partially due to COVID, was by far the highest incidence of fraud by a mile on record, and 30% of customers thought it was worse in 2021. So obviously 2022 is not complete yet, but super interested to see how that works out. But the point is that no matter what type of fraud tools there are to lock things down, unfortunately, there are people out there that are going to get ahead of it. And you can see that the overwhelming, majority of customers and companies think that there is more fraud today than less, versus last year. Business email compromise, when you get into it a little bit more detail, that is by far the most egregious and the most time-consuming to resolve, and hits the financial impact the hardest on companies when it comes to fraud. So with business email, there's different forms of business email compromise. The most frequent is a fraudster that's impersonating the email address of someone within your company. And I don't mean that their email address looks close. What I mean is that character for character, the email address is exactly the same as your internal one. There was a time where that was thought to not be able to be possible. I can tell you that's 100% possible, and it doesn't take very much to be able to do it. So what they'll do is, typically a vendor, you'll get an email from a vendor. Sometimes fraudsters are tracking the vendor communications from your vendors, so they kind of know the language and the wording that your vendors use when they communicate with you, and they'll mimic that to say, hey, Bill or Susie, we just got a new bank account. We need to switch the bank for the next payment. We need you to send the next payment to this bank account. And once the money gets transferred, if you're super busy that day and you just switch the numbers and make a payment, the fraudster will immediately wire that money somewhere else. Once the wire gets through, that money is gone. So the ability to track that is almost zero. I think the last statistic I saw, 11% of proven fraud cases in the United States were prosecuted, partially because there's not enough government agents to be able to do it, and partially because there's just so many of them, they'll never be able to have enough bandwidth to be able to do it. So you've got an 11% chance of prosecuting if you catch the person that actually did it. So not to paint like a doom and gloom picture, but it's something that certainly people should be concerned about. In the context of this conversation, accounts payable is the department that 58% of the companies polled by the AFP say is the ones that are involved in the business email compromise. No surprise there, they're dealing with the cash coming in, going out on a regular basis, but that's typically where these breaches happen. And then when you look at solving global payables, so I look at this in two ways. Number one, there's, is this a solution I need? Do I want it? Do I feel like I need it? And then if you decide the answer is yes, then the question becomes, who do I trust? Like, who's going to do this for me? So Tipalti has got a wide range of customers. We do very well in specific industries with specific ERPs, which is why we're having this call today. But there's a lot of companies that have lots of options, as you can see some of the logos that have gone with Tipalti for their accounts payable. Our retention of customers is by far the highest in the industry. I've worked in accounts payable for a long time, so I can tell you retention and customer support is not always what these type of providers are known for. So to have our retention rate average between 98 and 99%, what that says is that nearly every customer who's ever implemented Tipalti has found it to be a worthwhile investment and stuck with it. So, we could give you a sales pitch and it could look great, but then after a year you get off of it. That's not going to result in a 98, 99% retention rate. So the companies that get onto Tipalti certainly see the value. Part of that's because of our exceptional support. Part of it's because we continue to invest in the product. And a lot of it's based on things that customers tell us they need. maximizing efficiency and control costs, another super important part of a lot of the CFOs that I talk to on a daily basis. These are just some of the things that some of our customers have mentioned that they've said. I'm not going to read them all verbatim. You can certainly see that there's a lot of time and expense that's saved through AP automation. So this gets to the point of, is this something that I want to install in my business? If these type of metrics are important to your business, you might be a candidate for a solution such as Tipalti. And then as far as some of the accolades, these are pretty well-known review sites for providers and solutions. So, I mean, you can go on to any of these, like Capterra is certainly a very big one, G2, but all of these are third-party review sites. So you can go on any of these, and the consistency that you're going to see and the comments from the customers I think, would really drive a lot of our business, because most customers want to know, what do my peers think of this? They don't want to know what I think of it. Sorry, Len, they don't always want to know what you think of it, although that's certainly important. They want to know what their peers think of it. We can do a great job introducing it to them, but that's ultimately, that kind of makes them feel very comfortable. So these are some great places to look to find not just our solution, but other ones too, and how we stack up against them. So now I'm going to turn it over to Arsh. He is a solutions consultant with Tipalti. So he's going to show you exactly, not talking points, but really how the solution works, and be able to give you a good idea of what exactly Tipalti is.
Perfect. Thank you, Ron. And great to connect with everyone here. Appreciate you taking the time. So as Ron mentioned, I am a solutions consultant here at Tipalti. Before joining Tipalti, I used to work at Deloitte as an auditor for a number of years. And the reason I actually came over here is seeing the issue in very, very large companies, like with hundreds of millions in revenue a year, and then also much smaller companies as well, maybe just doing a few $1,000s in revenue per year. I was seeing consistent issues of redundant and very manual accounts payable processes. So in coming over to Tipalti, I really did see a need for it. And so I'll kind of just jump into exactly what we do here at Tipalti and how it's going to actually work for you. And that starts with the integration that you're seeing here. So instead of having to look through this too much, I'll kind of give you a high-level explanation with the integration that we have with SAP Business One and with other ERPs as well, is being able to push information back and forth so that you can not have to worry about that manual data transfer, and also not have to worry about maybe issues in when you are transferring that data and having errors in there. And so some of the records that we'll push from Tipalti into SAP Business One is going to be that vendor record, including changes that may have been made, the bills, including both when the bill is approved, so the AP can be recorded, and then bill payments so that you can close out that AP without having to do a painful reconciliation process using your bank statements. And also we can push over those vendor credits as well. That covers everything there on the left side, pushing from Tipalti into SAP Business One. And then some of the things we're going to pull from SAP Business One would be those PO records, goods receipts, and things like the values in your coding fields like department, class, payment terms, whatever those may be. So there's essentially information feeding back and forth between the two systems. However, the goal of Tipalti, because as the others have already mentioned, it is a holistic solution. So the goal is to handle all of your AP within Tipalti and then have that push over into systems like SAP Business One or other ERPs, so that anyone who needs to see what happened with AP can see it, but all the functions are performed in Tipalti. With that, Ron, you mind moving over to the next slide? So this is what we call the Tipalti wheel. It's just sort of a presentation as to what we can do from end to end here at Tipalti. And the goal with Tipalti is to have something that you can grow into as a company, rather than just have something that fits your current needs, because the evaluation process for a solution can sometimes be lengthy, where you want to make sure it's actually going to be able to fit your needs, and you want to make sure it's actually going to be able to fit those future needs as well. So this is going to be sort of the agenda for what we're going to be going through today. Going to start by directing your attention right at the top at supplier management. So this is where we will shift the onus of onboarding your vendors from your team and put this onto the vendors themselves. And that includes the management of the vendors down the line as well. Now, as Ron touched on, by pushing this onus over to them, this doesn't mean that we are going to sort of lose those security controls you may have in place. We have a number of different measures to make sure only authorized individuals are making changes, but your team is not facing the burden of having to manage and make those changes. Next, we go into tax compliance. Now, we've worked with KPMG to make sure that we have a tax engine built in that's going to reduce, again, the amount of work that your team needs to do from a tax compliance perspective, but still keep you as up to date as you need to, or maybe more than what you're doing currently. The PO management function, this is something that I won't be showing in depth today, but just letting you know that we do have something within Tipalti where you can be able to create purchase requisitions, have them flow through a predefined approval flow, and then convert into POs when they've been fully approved, and then so that we can do that full matching process within Tipalti. Now, you can also continue to create your purchase requisitions and your purchase orders within SAP Business One as well. So we give you the flexibility to offer, or excuse me, to do either one. Next, we have invoice management. Here, we aim to reduce the amount of time it takes to process your invoices, reduce manual entry errors associated with processing, and automate the PO matching and approval routing process as well. Now, we do that with a few different steps in between, including pulling what's on the invoice, populating it for you, automatically coding, and you letting us know in advance what your approvers, or excuse me, who your approvers are in various different situations so that we can populate them for you. Summary is less clicks, less keystrokes, and increased accuracy. Next, we're on to global remittance and FX solutions, which these two go hand in hand, just demonstrating how with Tipalti, you can pay out within the platform, whether that is going to be domestically or in 196 different countries around the world. We do have 6 different payment methods in which you can send those payments. So your vendor, as well as yourself, is going to have that flexibility. And then the beauty of it is not having to go elsewhere if you're going to be making some of those international payments. Again, we're keeping everything within Tipalti rather than having to go into like an external bank portal. And then finally, reconciliation and reporting. And this sort of carries on for what I was mentioning before, where we're going to make sure that everything that is done in Tipalti is going to land back into your ERP, including making sure that your accounts payable is being recorded properly or being removed appropriately as well. So with that, I think I'm just going to dive into a quick demo here to show you, instead of just speaking to what I just mentioned here, actually showing you how it's going to look within Tipalti. So Ron, if you don't mind releasing that screen share, and then I can just pop mine up and we can dive right into it. Thank you. So with Tipalti, to start things off, we are looking at the supplier hub right here. So with the supplier hub, we can send an invite out to your vendors in order to have them onboard into this portal. So that's sort of where we start things off, where you just need a few basic pieces of info, their name, their email address, and then they begin to fill in the information themselves rather than your team having to manually collect this over email. So this is in the supplier's perspective, and we do have a number of different security features within here as well, including multi-factor authentication when getting into this portal, as well as when changing payment information and such. Now, we try to keep things as simple as possible, since it is going to be putting the onus on the vendor, with a 3-step onboarding process. Starting with the address information. The address information, first of all, Tipalti is actually a licensed money transmitter. That means we are held to similar standards as the tier 1 banks, one of which include, before every payment is actually executed, we are going to bump the address information against OFAC and other sanctioned screening lists to ensure that we aren't paying anybody that we shouldn't be paying. For example, maybe a known fraudster or someone who is sanctioned for another reason. That looks after our license, but it will also make sure that your team is not paying out those kind of companies as well. Second thing is address information will automatically drive the payment methods that are available as they differ from country to country, so that your vendor is going to be able to choose how they want to be paid. Excuse me here, I had one of my teammates fiddling around, so I'm just going to change this to the United States. And then we'll move along to the payment methods. The benefit here is that your vendors can choose how they want to be paid rather than you assuming how they may want to be paid. And then when they are actually entering in their own information, they're entering their own information. Plus, we have a vetting engine built in here with 26,000 validation rules, so that let's say if I slip up like I did here and enter the Bank of America routing code incorrectly, it's going to give me an error that it's going to give me an error notification and will not let me move on from the screen until I've corrected the errors. That's going to make sure that your team actually collects clean information upfront rather than having to deal with things like failed payments down the line. Next, we move on to tax forms. Here's where the tax compliance piece comes into play. So whether you're mainly paying out domestic vendors or you're paying out international, we have these digitized tax forms that can be filled out as part of the onboarding process. And if your vendors are ever unsure about what tax form they need to use, we offer various different elements of hand-holding throughout here, if you will, like a 5-question survey of if they're unsure about tax forms. It's going to guide them to the exact tax form that they need to fill in. We even offer this portal in 16 different languages. So again, just making it easier for your vendors to understand. And last thing is we actually strip down all these tax forms into just the bare essentials. That's something that we also work with KPMG to do as well. So for example, the W-8, usually about a 16-pager filled with legal and tax jargon. We have stripped it down to just 5 pages that is much more consumable, which will draw a lot less questions from your vendors. And similarly, we do the same thing with the W-9s as well. We do nightly TIN validations to make sure that we're not just checking the TIN validation up front, but we will also do it down the line. Now that is in terms of the onboarding process, but there's quite a few other aspects of the portal that make life a little bit easier for you as well as your vendors. One is we can assist with 1099 reporting since we have the W-9s on file as well as the payments anyways. Next is we've been able to help a lot of our customers reduce the amount of inquiries they get from their customers around more basic things like, where's my payment? Have you received my invoice? Not sure if a lot of you receive questions along these lines, but Tipalti customers have been able to reduce this by showing them the information in the portal, as well as sending them automated email notifications when there are changes to their payments, so that they have a couple different locations they can go to see that information without having to bug you in the team. As you can see here, I can see if something's been paid, if something has been maybe submitted for payment. I can be able to see a number of different things in more overall scale on the payments, and then more granular on the invoices as well. So that's it for the onboarding process. We have a number of different ways to make sure that the vendors actually entering clean information, and that onus of managing your vendors as they grow is not going to be your team's burden. So now we're going to come out of the supplier portal, and now we're going to go into the AP hub. That is where the AP or the finance teams will operate within Tipalti. So I'm in the AP team's perspective, and now we're looking at processing a bill. So for all the bills that come into Tipalti, you're going to be able to process them, and this is this invoice processing screen that we're on. I mentioned before that the goal of Tipalti's invoice processing is to reduce the amount of time it takes to process, as well as reduce manual entry errors. And we do that with 3 layers at work. First of all, our OCR technology stands for optical character recognition, and it will pull what is on the invoice right here and populate the header level and the line level details. Now, OCR is not something that is unique from the rest of the industry. It is something that a lot of our competitors will have as well. However, OCR is not perfect. It can have errors in it, which is why Tipalti actually has a second layer that is more unique to us, our managed services team. That is a set of human eyes on Tipalti's end that will check the work of OCR, correct errors, and teach OCR to get smarter over time so that we're not just taking that traditional element, we're actually adding on that human element beforehand so that you, when you get this invoice, your job isn't to scan every little detail because Tipalti's already done that for you. Next is the invoice coding element. We have machine learning at play here that will remember how you coded invoices in the past and be able to code them appropriately in the future so that by the time you get this screen, it turns less into a data entry and more just a quick scan that everything is in line with expectations, because it'll pretty much all be filled out for you. The next thing I also wanted to mention is you're going to be able to attach messages and files to an invoice, because as I mentioned before, keeping all the communication within Tipalti, as we found that a lot of companies are often performing this type of communication in external messaging systems or email. So this just retains everything within the bill. Next is the approval routing. So right now I'm showing you a bill that is non-PO backed, meaning it's going to need to be routed for approval before it can be paid. Within Tipalti, you're going to be able to build in your delegation of approval matrix and have it automatically routed for approval when you are simply filling out the fields, or excuse me, when Tipalti simply fills out the fields for you above. For example, if you want the department to be driving your approver, we have a department level approver that has been automatically added to the bill. If you want finance to also be involved in the approval flow as certain dollar thresholds get hit, that is why we have Charlie right over here brought into the approval flow as well. So there's a number of different elements that we can do, that we can take to populate approvers. You dictate how you want it approved, and we will make sure that it's actually going to be routed appropriately. And when your approver actually gets the bill, it's going to look a little something like this, where they can answer via email, a place that a lot of individuals will check on a regular basis anyways, rather than forcing them to remember to log into another system that people can often forget. And in this email, we give them everything that was inputted in Tipalti. We give them previous supplier bills so that they can do little trend analyses on the fly and not have to request this information out of the system. And if the processor did attach any files or make any comments, you could see it here. We'll automatically send those reminders for you as well, so your team is not having to remember to send those kind of things. And then finally, from this email, your approvers can take action so that right from here, they can approve, update coding, send it back to AP with comments, or even dispute with the vendor with comments as well. So this just allows them to see everything they need to see within this approval screen so that they're not having to request things outside of the system that will, one, take additional time from your AP team, and then two, also delay the approval process so your vendors will get a more delayed payment as well. So that is essentially it for the non-PO back side of things. However, I recognize a lot of you may actually be using purchase orders today as well. And so in terms of the Tipalti PO matching, whether you are creating purchase orders from SAP or another ERP, or whether you decide to use our procurement module, we can automate the PO matching for you regardless. Before actually showing you what our PO matching screen looks like, I'm just going to pop into the back office settings to show you how you can reflect your risk profile within the tolerances for PO matching. So I'm going to pop back to the PO matching settings right over here. You can set different tolerances, whether you're doing a two-way match or if you're doing a three-way match. And the tolerances, there's flexibility to set it at the total bill level. You can set it at the line level and on an amount basis or even percentage. So why I bring this up is based on the amount of the difference between the PO and the invoice or the receipts, you may want different workflows kicked off to, again, as I mentioned earlier, reflect that risk profile. So I'll give you a for instance just by using the total bill amount threshold here. where if something is between $0 and $500, you may determine this to be very trivial and not even worth your time, so no approvals required. Then you can have a different workflow if it's between 500 to 5,000, where it will require an approval, and then a different workflow where it's more severe and it's greater than 5,000. You're going to be able to configure all of these so that the workflows that should be initiated when there's your determined level of risk of a difference, we can have those kicked off automatically. So now getting a feel as to what the tolerances look like, I'm going to pop into the PO matching screen where you can see how we match everything up for you, and you're only going to have to take a look at discrepancies to PO matching rather than matching everything. So I'm going to go to the PO matching screen, and just building off the point I mentioned, where if something is perfectly matched, Tipalti can make it so that you don't even have to take a look at it. Like invoice, receipt, and PO are all lined up perfectly. Why have you do redundant steps and take a look at something that Tipalti's already matched? If that's the case, we can just flow it right through, make it so you don't even have to take a look at it and have it ready for payment. But sometimes there could be discrepancies for PO matching. So I'm going to dive into one of these examples just to show you what our PO matching screen looks like. This is the PO matching screen, just to give you an intro as to what's going on here. The top here, we have header level info. Left-hand side, we have the invoice lines. The middle, we have the receipts. And then right-hand side, we have the purchase order lines. You're also able to do two-way matching or header level matching as well. So this is not what it's limited to, but this is sort of the full scope of what you can see. And now you can see that we also have the invoice image here. We have purchase orders shown here as well. And we also have an audit trail on every single one of these tabs above here, which we're going to timestamp the activity that was taken and exactly when it was done, so that, let's say you have external auditors or maybe even just some high-level leadership that wants to take a look into what happened for a given bill, they're going to be able to do so very easily. And from this screen here, we will we will automate the matching process for you so that you're not having to find the correct PO and stuff and line up everything. And when things are lined up, you see a blue check mark that just sort of lets you know, don't even bother taking a look at it. And if there are these other discrepancies, for example, like a price discrepancy, that is where those tolerances that I just mentioned a second ago will come into play, so that based on your risk, we can make sure to allow it to pass through, route it for approval, or maybe kick off some more severe workflows as well if the difference starts to get really high. Next, once the bills have been fully approved, fully matched, and all the details have sort of been inputted for you, then you're going to be able to batch together bills for payment. Once you have batched them together, we pop over to the Payments tab, and we have just left the bill screen. On this Payments tab, this is where you can have an additional layer of approval where we have payment batch approvers in addition to invoice approvers. So if you're used to going into somewhere like a bank portal and releasing your payments before they're actually going to be sent out on the scheduled date, you can carry over that process here as well. Where within here, a payment batch approver may want to take a look through what's going on in a given batch. And I should clarify, every line you see here is an individual payment batch. So let's say I'm the CFO, I'm an approver here, and I want to drill into this batch a little bit deeper before I decide that this one is going to be okay to approve. So when I click into this specific batch, I can see everything included in it. And from this screen, you can also see why Tipalti is very highly regarded within the payment space. In this single batch, we have various different currencies being paid out in all kinds of payment methods, sent out to vendors around the world. And finally, all of these invoices and all of this data can be processed within the same batch, even if it is a separate entity. It allows you to manage all those multiple business units with a centralized view, because this could be entity 1, entity 2, entity 3. And from this, we're also able to remove payments individually from the batch, and then we can approve as needed. Now, this next portion that I'm going to show is once you know how much you need to pay, understanding what your future cash flow obligations can be important from a planning perspective and also just from a funding perspective as well. So that's why when we get to the funds required tab, this is going to give you a bird's eye view as to what your AP working capital requirements are based on when batches are scheduled to go out. So you can get a high level view. And as I mentioned before, we have all these entities within the same instance of Tipalti. So you can see right here that this is entity 1, which is a USD entity. This is entity 2, which is a Canadian entity. And this is entity 3, a European one. This also comes to show you the the global approach that Tipalti takes to solving these holistic problems is not just going to be focused in the US, not just focused in Europe, but we can sort of handle everything within one platform. So now that we have everything approved, everything paid out, and all the payment batches have been approved, the reconciliation, I just wanted to double click on this point as well. Everything that we're doing within Tipalti, you're never having to enter it in again after it's already been entered. The payment, or excuse me, the invoice, as soon as it becomes fully approved or fully PO matched, we can automatically sync that into SAP Business One or your other ERPs. Once the payment is executed, there's no more having to scroll through the bank statement and find the payments that went out and match them up to invoices. As soon as the payment goes out, we will push it over into SAP Business One and close out those open invoices so that your liabilities can be appropriate. And then things like the vendor record, as soon as it's created in Tipalti, we push that over. And as the POs are created in the SAP side, we will pull those in. The summary of what I'm trying to say there is all the reconciliation aspects will happen automatically, and we're going to make sure that the data integrity is preserved by not having someone rekey those things in. It will flow through our system. So that is essentially it for the end-to-end demo here. If you are interested in taking a bit of a deeper look, you can always reach out to our team and we can dive into things more specific to your use case as well. But with that, Len or Ron, unless there's anything else, I think we can open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Sounds good.
As we wait for some questions to fill in, I just want to let everyone know that joined us today that there'll be a recording of this presentation sent out within the next day or so. You'll receive that via email, and you can always reach out to anyone here with the information that will be in that email. We did get one question. If you're saving 80% of AP workload, what can AP clerks focus on?
Yeah, so I can add to that. So what I've seen is, a lot of times instead of doing the menial, printing checks and keying in invoices, it becomes more of an analyst role. I used to work for a construction and general contractor ERP that, when we installed an accounts payable solution, instead of doing that work, this person decided to do more of an analytical role, and they found they were buying, let's say tools or lumber from like 19 different places. Instead, she basically said, okay, let's take our top suppliers, let's do like a quick bid, and let's consolidate that down to 2 or 3 and get volume discounts and save the company a bunch of money by, number one, streamlining the process, number 2, with the volume discounts. So doing more value added tasks like that really bring, more significant benefit back to the company is something I've seen quite a bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. One more question is, how long does a typical Tipalti integration normally take?
I can cover that one. It typically takes between 4 to 6 weeks. And in those 4 to 6 weeks, that would be our implementation team doing the heavy lifting there. And then in terms of the actual commitment from our customers, I think it's ranges between about maybe 9 to 10 hours or so of actual time on their end. So that is sort of however fast you can work, we can work with you. If you're able to give that time in terms of training and determining things like chart of accounts, then we may be able to move even a bit quicker.
Awesome. Thanks, Arsh. It looks like that might be it for today. Thank you guys for coming and joining our webinar today, and thank you to our speakers. They did an amazing job. Like I said, we'll be sending out some information right after today just to see how you guys enjoyed the webinar today and with the recording. Thank you all so much, and you can have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Emily.
Cheers, everyone.
Talk to you later. Thanks.
Have a good day.